Good morning and welcome to episode 95 of the Jaguar Report podcast. My name's Gus Logue, joined as always by my co-host John Shipley. John, you're looking a little red in a good way.
Yeah,
Yeah, you've been touching grass.
yeah, a little bit. Some yard.
Yeah,
A little bit. Some yard work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Married life, huh?
Yeah, I'm washed. I'm completely washed.
Well, that's good to see. I feel like I don't know. I was pretty sick of the draft cycle starting about 2 weeks ago. Just like the start of the month, I was like, all right, I've been in the weeds too deep. I just want to get it over with at this point.
My counter, imagine you were covering the Washington Commanders and you were having to do all this coverage on Top Golf and Jane Daniels and then Adam Schefter basically emptied his clip, earlier today. So now, more or less, Jane Daniels is perfectly cool not playing there, etc. It's definitely been a draft cycle though. Every draft cycle feels the same to me now. By the time there's a week to go, it's just brutal. They didn't even move the draft up. It doesn't need to be at the end of April.
Yeah, absolutely.
Make it mid-April. Maybe early April. It doesn't need to be at the end.
Well, they should make the draft before free agency so that teams can truly draft for value and then fill needs later in free agency. But
I don't know if I like that.
You don't know about that one?
I don't know if I like that.
I feel like they just do it the opposite way to spread out the calendar and make it.
I don't know. Would that kind of screw veterans? Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anti-union Gus.
Come on.
Yeah.
We're 60 seconds in.
This sounds very much anti-CBA. Yeah.
No. I mean, maybe it would be a little bit worse for the veterans, but I feel like it would be the draft outcomes would be better because then teams aren't drafting for need, which is a good segue into maybe the first observation we could take from Trent Baalke and Doug Pederson's joint press conference yesterday. It was on Thursday, a week before the draft, the annual pre-draft luncheon. I was not there, but John was there. And the very first two questions were kind of about drafting for need, essentially. Even though the words need and value weren't used, it was a good job by Demetrius, I thought. It was basically how do you have to weigh drafting guys who can contribute right away versus guys who will maybe contribute a few years down the road instead. And so Baalke, which is very similar to his responses last year on the same topic, said that you can draft need over value if the two prospects are closely aligned in grades and then the fit with the team in terms of scheme and culture and yada, yada, yada. And so he was saying he clarified later and said, obviously if there's a 2-round difference, then you're going to draft the better player and not the bigger need. But if you're just splitting hairs between which player is better, then you go with position of need. And so I don't know. I wasn't really surprised by that response just because, again, he said it last year and it's kind of reflective in their recent drafts, not just last year. But I feel like that was just something we definitely had to bring up.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've always thought, attending these pre-draft pressers that they're normally pretty forthcoming. I remember walking out of the 2022 one thinking, oh, wow, Trayvon Walker is going to be the number one pick, because I know then, that was really, it felt up in the air until maybe a few days before the draft. But that, about a week, maybe 2 weeks before, just, their comments, the way, they answer questions made me feel that way. And so I normally think that they're not going to reveal their cards or anything like that, but they'll at least be, some aspects of honesty.
Yeah.
I think on the needs topic, it's kind of obvious, right? Everybody loves to say take best player available, and every GM in the world says they take the best player available, but are they really? Is there any team in the NFL that does that isn't just taking a player? Maybe the Eagles now and then. Otherwise, is there any world where Marvin Harrison and JJ McCarthy would be within 30 picks of each other?
That's what I was about to say. JJ McCarthy is about to be a top 5. Top half of the first round pick. And so,
if Bo Nix or Michael Penix go in the first round, if
that would be so crazy.
Obviously they're quarterbacks, but it's just kind of the theme of a larger point that every team drafts, for need. Marvin Harrison would be the second overall pick if teams weren't, if teams are only drafting best player available. Best player available is such a fallacy to me. It's such I don't know. It's just copium for GMs, I think.
Yeah.
To kind of like justify their decisions, And if they make one the fan base or media doesn't agree with, well, who's the best player available? What are you going to do? But, I mean, even going back to last year, I know people probably didn't identify tight end and running back as their top needs, but if you go back to last year, in their eyes, other than finding a right tackle to replace Jawan, what did it seem like they thought their major needs were entering the offseason? Did it seem like they thought they had any?
I think their need was like getting a power run game, and so they thought that both Tank and Brenton Strange were going to help fix that. And then they made what combined 200 snaps.
Yeah, I'm not going to be convinced those were best player available picks. They were best player available at a position of need, So, and that to me kind of like what he said, and maybe I'll look like an idiot. Maybe they take a receiver in the first round. I keep thinking I'm not going to, and then the more and more conversations I have, it's more and more maybe, it seems like an actual possibility. But I just think cornerback is such a more obvious need than wide receiver that if you're talking about, need versus, best player available, it seems obvious to me if they had a corner anywhere close to receiver, they would take a corner, right?
Yeah, I'm totally expecting a corner. I think the only world in which it's not a cornerback, that's the first round pick for the Jaguars, is a world in which they trade. But like even if they do trade, like I think that was another takeaway from yesterday, is that it seems less likely that there would be a trade into the top 10 and more likely that it would be just moving up a couple of spots to like get their guy. But like I still feel like there's a more likely chance they're just like trying to get their guy at corner than like even thinking there's a chance that Remo Dunze or Malik Neighbors falls outside the top 12.
That's my thing. Like, I'm sure they would love to pick one of the big three receivers. Like, I'm sure they would love for that to be a reality. But,
yeah,
I mean, unless one of them falls, which makes sense. Does this seem like a front office that would want to deal like a future first, which is probably what you need to do to move into like the top 6, 7, or 8? No, it really doesn't. But I could see them making that move like 5 or 6, spots up. It was interesting. He specifically mentioned 12 and 13. I don't think he was doing it for like a specific player or even like identifying, the Broncos and, Raiders and also, throw the Saints in there. I don't even think it was doing that. I think it was like him saying that they won't know who like their pool of guys to think about selecting who will be until the first dozen or so picks are off the board. You know what I mean? Like, like until it's like 5 picks before them and they can narrow it down to 5 guys and say, we're going to take one of these guys. I think that's what he was saying more so than him saying, oh, we're looking at potentially trading with Denver and maybe moving up for a cornerback or something like that. That was more so my impression, but I know a lot of people ran with that.
No, you're totally right. I was just more so saying that like the point that if there is a trade up, it's going to be like to 12 instead of like 8 or 9. But I'm with you. Like, I don't necessarily think even that means a trade up. It's more so just like that's the spot in the draft when they're gonna like actually start to realize like the players they might be able to take.
I regret tweeting the analytics comment.
Why?
They got like 30 pro retweets because like maybe I didn't put it in the proper context, but it was like half the people were like he's right and half the people were like, oh, he's making fun of any analytics people because he said the analytics people. I got the impression he was agreeing with them, and
yeah, totally.
The context of the answer was he was like, if you trade up, it better be worth it, And when you talk to analytics people, which I think is a pretty normal response, they say normally don't trade up, and they do. Yeah, and
quarterback.
He's traded up, I think, 3 times in his career with the Jaguars, and from everything I know, I'm not going to sit here and say he's Andrew Berry or Quessy or anything like that. He's not like an analytics-based GM. Because at the end of the day, he still makes his own decisions. But from everything I know and hear, he doesn't like turn his nose up and like says nerd, get back, like to the IT room and stuff. He at least takes the information in and is willing to listen to it and implement it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I definitely could see him seeing that as trading up. It better be for a very specific guy. And you look at some of his past in Jacksonville, his trade ups. He traded up for Jordan Smith in 2021. That felt like an urban pick, but still, that was obviously, a whiff. Trade up for Devin Lloyd to select in the first round. Not, anything poking holes in Lloyd's game, but if you just probably look at the data and the pure surplus value, probably better off just holding on to your 4th round pick and the first pick of the 2nd round as opposed to, moving up for a linebacker. And then Snoop Connor, 2 of those were late, or not late, but mid
early
day 3 picks. Yeah, day 3 picks. So only one was even in the top 100, and that one seemed like one of the more, I wouldn't say panic move, but one of the more forced moves of their regime. Because if you remember, leading up to that, every rumor mill was saying they wanted Walker and Walker, Trayvon Walker and Quay Walker. Quay Walker went off the board fairly early, somewhere in the early 20s. It felt like they felt like they had to make a move to secure an inside linebacker. And so to me, that pick even felt a little bit out of his DNA, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I think that pick definitely, it was a trade that happened just on the moment because Quay was picked earlier than they expected. And so that goes with what he was saying yesterday, where he's like, I don't understand the point of making a trade before the draft because you don't have assurance that the player that you want is going to be there unless it's for the number 1 pick, obviously. So.
Yeah. I mean, and that to me, says, if he trades up for a guy, it has to be somebody super specific. I'm thinking, obviously one of the big 3 receivers or one of the top 2 cornerbacks, right? And I guess that brings me to my next interesting thing that he said about the cornerback group. He basically said how he thinks it's a good cornerback group throughout the class. If you poll 32 teams, you might get 32 different top 10s. Is that saying to you that he doesn't think there's much of a difference between the top corners in the draft? Which obviously, would impact whatever, they would do potentially at 17. Because, why trade up if you don't think there's a big difference between Kool-Aid McKinstry and Kenyon Mitchell?
Yeah, I see how you can take it that way. I thought it was just kind of gibberish, honestly, and it was just a non-answer. But I could even if that's not even if he didn't mean to hint at that, I think that's a fair way to take it because I think it's true. Where I don't know,
that was
different top 10 rankings across every team, which sounds pretty obvious, but it would be there would be a bigger disparity for the cornerback position than probably any other position.
Should my arms hurt? Was that a Catherine Ricci? Yeah. Okay. Well, at the end of the day, did you walk away less convinced that they would trade up in general? And if they did trade up, who do you think it would be? Whether somebody specifically or a position group? Because to me, I did walk away less convinced that they would make a big move for a receiver and more convinced that maybe they try to start the cornerback run as opposed to. I think it was Jonathan Jones of CBS did, I thought, a really realistic mock where no cornerbacks were off the board until pick 15, and then Terrion and Kenyon go 15 and 16, and the Jags, if they want to get a starting corner in the first round, basically have to take one at 17. Move back, cornerback run still happens, so they ended up taking Kool-Aid McKinstry. But end of my ramble. Back to my original question.
So I think I definitely walked away also less convinced that they were going to make a trade up. I think at this point I'm pretty firm in a stance that if there's a trade that happens, I think it's more likely that there will be a trade back than a trade up. Because trading up for a cornerback confuses me a little bit, especially with the Baalke quote that you just said. I feel like there's a first tier, or there's really just 2 tiers, or just not that much separation between the cornerbacks in this class. And so I feel like there's not much of a difference between cornerback 1 and cornerback 3. And so in that scenario that you just had for Jonathan Jones's mock, I think they should be fine just sitting back and taking the 3rd corner as opposed to being nervous about that situation and then moving up with the Broncos or the Raiders at 12 or 13 to make sure that they get their guy. Because I just don't think there's a cornerback in this class that warrants that type of move. There's no Sauce Gardner, as we've said. There's no Derek Stingley.
Because trading up to 12 would require probably at least a number 96 overall pick, right?
Yeah, honestly, the way I took it is that if the Falcons take Arnold at 8 and then the Vikings end up not taking a quarterback and they take Quinyon Mitchell, or Quinyon Mitchell goes 11 through 13-ish, then maybe they trade up because they're okay, we've got our third guy, and then there's a pretty big tier drop off for us.
Yeah.
So I almost think that that's more likely is that they're trading up for like the bottom of the tier as opposed to for the top of the tier.
I'm with you. I think just like in a hypothetical, say it takes 17 and 96 to move up to 12 and select Kenyon Mitchell, or you stay at 17, pick Kool-Aid McKinstry and a player in the third round. I think the second scenario is better because just in terms of the draft, I don't think there's any degree of confidence that you should have that much in player A being better than player B. You know what I mean? Unless obviously you're talking about like Caleb Williams versus like a undrafted free agent quarterback. That's obviously a completely different scenario. But just when you have two guys closely, I think everything says that you shouldn't have that supreme level of confidence, and that's normally how a lot of teams kind of screw themselves, is being positive in their evaluation ability, when a lot of times their evaluation ability has basically nothing, to do with it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know if we had actually like clarified the tweet that you had about Baalke and analytics, but yeah, the reason that analytics people say don't trade up is just that like the draft is so hard to predict that it's basically a crapshoot. So you might as well take as many swings at the bat as possible, and so that's why history in a third rounder makes more sense than whoever your favorite corner prospect is.
Yeah, I and for the record, I think they're right. Like, obviously, there are trade ups that have worked out in the past. Julio Jones, great move. Trent McDuffie, yeah. Patrick Mahomes, there's probably been several quarterbacks, even though it's well known that trading up for a quarterback is different than trading up for any other position. And if you trade up, if it's like a pick swap, you can get better value out of that. So it's not like a blanket statement saying all trade ups are bad. It's just if you're playing the odds more often than not, you're better off not making, the move up like that. And
yeah.
I personally, I agree with it. I know it's fun. like Malik Neighbors go Zoom. Like I know it's very enticing. It's just my personal opinion. I agree with the analytics. I say they shouldn't trade up, but it'd be interesting if they traded up like number 12 or number 13 and took Terrion Arnold and started the cornerback run. As much as I've been hammering they need to take a cornerback early, I'd probably have a pretty mixed review on it from my point of view.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair because it's all about like the process with the draft. I mean, with most things, but especially the draft, it's like you got to try to figure out like less so whether or not you personally like Terrion Arnold, but just about like the way they went about getting him.
And it's different if they were actually picking at 12 instead of having to move up for one. Like it's different deciding between player A and player B when you're not giving up resources to do it. But giving up resources to be able to make that choice just normally isn't, the right call.
Yeah. I do think on the flip scenario, if they end up trading back, I feel like a wide receiver or an offensive lineman would make sense. Because I think that scenario is that they get to pick 17 and there's either been 0 or 1 cornerbacks off the board, and they have like 2 or 3 or 4 corners that they still really like. And so they're like, all right, someone come trade up for Brian Thomas or Xavier Worthy or Donnie Mitchell or, I don't know, Troy Fautanu or Alu or any like Guyton. There's a ton of like offensive line prospects that I feel like there's going to be a run in the middle of the first round. And so like the Bills and the Chiefs are both obviously like candidates trade up for a receiver. I was trying to think of offensive line candidates. I know there was a report today that the Commanders really want to trade up for an offensive lineman. So maybe look out for a Commanders trade. But yeah, I just think that trading back in general is probably going to be more likely than trading up, not just because like the analytics say that you should trade down as opposed to trading up if you're going to do one, but also just like with the way that I expect the board to fall, like where I think there's probably a better chance that 0 or 1 corners go off the board by pick 17 than 2 to 3.
Here's a couple teams just picking after them. I could see trading up for an offensive lineman. Pittsburgh at 20. Miami at 21.
Cowboys.
You're at the Cowboys? Yeah, Cowboys. I think you could put, honestly, I think you could even maybe put the Eagles in there at 22.
I think they're probably taking whoever the best corner is.
Sure.
But yeah, you definitely can't rule it out. Green Bay, I think, will probably take a lineman.
So I
picks too. Green Bay, I feel like Green Bay makes a lot of sense.
And it seems like people are like actually actively against the idea of trading back when, like the way you just described it, I think it'd be an ideal scenario. And it's funny, like so many people hate last year's draft class and say, oh, they shouldn't make a lot of picks because of last year's draft class. I have no personal take on that, but just like looking at it, objectively down the middle, trading back worked out pretty good for them last year. I mean, they got Anton Harrison and Antonio Johnson for trading back. I mean, if my memory serves correctly, I think Parker Washington was another, pick. I could be wrong there, but either way, they got some, decent players and move backs. So it's just interesting to me that so many people hate it when it was pretty good last year. It worked out for them.
Yeah, it worked out pretty good.
Yeah.
The first round where you could like really recoup stuff. Like I feel like because they traded back in the second round too, right? And everyone was like, "Come, Baalke, what are you doing? Calm down, man." And so like that one is like still fine and still like it probably got plus value out of the trade, but I don't know. I think it's like the farther along you go in the draft, like the more you might as well just stay your position because you're only going to get back like a 6th rounder as opposed to a 4th or 5th.
Yeah, and that's fair. All right. Next takeaway. Did what he say about the offensive line mean anything to you at all? Saying that he thought you could find starters in like the 4th and 5th round?
Not really, because I feel like he said the same thing about the cornerback class and the wide receiver class.
Sure. Every position group is good.
Yeah, and like he's right in that like all 3 classes are really good and really deep and have guys in the middle. But like I feel like he had like almost the same response with different words for each position group. And so like I'm sure if you have a takeaway from it, I'll probably agree with it. But it's more so just that like I agree with what you're saying than like because you took it away from the presser yesterday specifically.
No, because you're right. He basically said the exact same thing about wide receivers, and you said how the big 3 were obviously good players, and hot take.
Yeah,
Jaguars general manager Trent Baalke thinks Rome Odunze, Malik Neighbors, and Marvin Harrison are good at football. I feel like if you ask all
really
yeah, fair enough. So I did a mock a couple days ago where I gave in to the fan pressure and looked at a scenario of what moving up for a receiver would look like. I gave up the 48th pick and a future 6 to move up to 9 to select Neighbors. One, it wasn't at all me like predicting something like that would happen. Maybe I should have made that a little bit more clear. I saw like Sportstronaut or something said it was like report Jaguars looking to move up from Malik Neighbors. I was like, that's not correct. But
that's not your fault. They just do that with everything.
Yeah. But the one thing I did include in there that I do think, could qualify is that, they're really high on Malik Neighbors. I in terms of really high, I think from what I know and what I've heard, they probably think he's one of the best like individual players in the draft class. Now that doesn't at all mean that they will move up for him, but if a guy was to fall, I think he's the guy they would probably hope, to prefer to fall, which honestly, I mean, makes sense. I mean, look at, what they lost in Calvin Ridley for one. I feel like Malik Neighbors could perfectly, replace some of that. Obviously, he's not the route runner Calvin Ridley is, but just some of the movement ability, the way that you can get him open with free releases and moving him around the formation, his overall athletic ability. Obviously, Baalke is a big, traits guy. And then ultimately, I think that they could see him as somebody who could mesh with the guys they currently have. Like Gabe Davis makes sense as an X who basically just does the perimeter stuff. Like Calvin Ridley kind of got pigeonholed into last year. Like I feel like he could reasonably take over for like Zay Jones, whereas Marvin Harrison Jr. and Rome Odunze are more like those guys you just put an X and you set it and forget it. I think we're all kind of different. So I don't think they're going to move up for him, but I do think like if they wanted a receiver to fall, I think it would probably be him.
Your scoop is perfect because it confirmed our priors. Like I feel like we've said maybe multiple times, but definitely at least once that even if we disagree or people might disagree about whether Rome or Malik is the wide receiver 2 in the class, like we both said that Malik seems more like the Jaguars type, especially for like just like the way the current offense is constructed. But I even think in general, like just like go zoom, go fast downfield, and Trevor's big arm can get it to you. And then like I feel like Baalke usually likes like big physical traits, like we've talked about how he likes to win off the bus. But physical traits with Neighbors are pretty special. So yeah, I'm definitely was not surprised, but happy to see that report.
Yeah, and especially after yesterday, I don't think that Neighbors will end up a Jaguar. I think I said the other day, my official prediction right now is Kool-Aid McKinstry at number 17. But somebody asked me on Twitter, they said, you're one of the first people on Anton, which I put Anton in a few mock drafts for them. But for the record, I also in my final mock draft gave them Osiris Torrance, which was way off. So I will take no credit. Let it be known. And I love taking credit for things I don't deserve credit for, but I will take no credit for being first on Anton. But I will say, in terms of just who I think the pick will be, this is probably the least confident I've been. But I think part of that is because they've had a number one overall pick twice, for one. And now they're picking in the middle. When they were picking late first last year, it was kind of obvious it was going to be an offensive lineman. So that was easier because that was the range. It looked like the offensive linemen were going to go.
Yeah, now, he got suspended the week before.
Yeah, exactly. And now it's different. They're in the middle of the first. I'm really not confident in my overall prediction. But right now, I think they take Kool-Aid McKinstry. Whether that's at 17 or elsewhere, I don't know. But he's who I think will walk away as a Jaguar. We'll see if that changes between now and Thursday.
I think that's the best prediction to have because you and I both did mock drafts site by site for our respective websites, and we both had the option of taking the first cornerback off the board, and I took Terrion Arnold, and you took Quinion Mitchell. So I feel like that'd be a fun thing to debate on next week's pre-draft show. But I agree with you where I think Kool-Aid is officially the best prediction to have, just because Terrion and Quinion are I feel inarguably cornerback 1 and 2. You can flip it depending on who you like more, but I think the common consensus is that those are the top two. And there's, I don't know who the Jaguars would like more. I'm inclined to think it's Arnold, but I don't actually know. But there's a very real chance that one or both of them is off the board before 17. And I would be a little surprised if McKinstry was off the board before 17, but he just fits exactly what they want. He can play press from day one, and obviously fill their biggest roster need. And then it's a big deal coming from Alabama, even if they haven't won a national title recently, in the past 3 years or whatever. It's so important to come from a school like that, because that was one thing Baalke said yesterday was they're really looking for people with championship pedigree. We saw that in free agency with signing. Not that the Bills have won a championship, but they've had some playoff experience between Mitch Morse and Abe Davis. And then obviously, I guess the Niners didn't win a Super Bowl either, but then getting the playoff experience with Arik Armstead. And so, yeah, I think getting someone from a school like Alabama really matters. And so, yeah, I'm with you that Terrion is the best realistic mock.
Just because you mentioned the 49ers, before I get back on track, when I tweeted the analytics quote yesterday, somebody retweeted it, a San Francisco guy was like, I don't think the analytics people would have told you to take Solomon Thomas over Patrick Mahomes, which Jim Baalke didn't do. John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan did that. I corrected him and said that, and he was like, oh, damn. He deletes it and makes another one. I think the analytics people would have told you not to take players with ACL injuries. He went back to the well. Man. I felt bad because Baalke said something I completely agreed with, and I felt like I'm getting it from everywhere, man. It was crazy. So, to your point about the cornerbacks, I have a tidbit and a nugget to give still on the show. Yeah, exactly. A tidbit and a nugget. But that will be right after this break. So hang with us, and we'll be right back. All right, we're back. I'll start off with the tidbit. We'll save the nugget for in a few minutes. All right, the tidbit is, I kind of tweeted this, but to your point about Kool-Aid being, maybe the most probable option just based on Kenyon and Terrion might go a little bit before that. From conversations I've had with people, out there in the draft sphere, people involved in processes, there's a pretty strong belief that Arnold goes before 17. And that Kool-Aid's range is from the Jaguars to the Eagles. So it seems like a lot of people expect Kool-Aid to be a top 22 pick and for Terrion to go before 17. It's like from conversations I've had a widely held belief by some people. Maybe that doesn't happen because the draft is obviously super unpredictable. If you make a prediction about the draft, 9 times out of 10, you're going to look like an idiot. But just the vibes right now, it seems like people would project for the most expected guy to be at 17 would be Kool-Aid over Terrion, if that makes sense.
Yeah, just of the 2 Alabama guys, at least.
Yeah, because I mean, it sure seems like Terrion's going to be the first or second corner off the board. So it's really about where that cornerback run starts, and maybe Atlanta takes one. I don't think they do, but I think they're going edge or maybe even Byron Murphy.
Wow.
Yeah, it seems like they're smoking cool. That.
I don't. Yeah, Dallas Turner has been mocked to them forever, but I feel like they'll trade back. I feel like the Colts are a big corner team. Like Chris Ballard said, I think today, we just talking well about all the young corners that they have, but man, they're young and inexperienced, and I feel like mostly day 3 guys. So it definitely makes sense to either pick a corner before Jacksonville, obviously, since they have the 15th pick, but even to move up and make sure they get their own guy.
Yeah. And then Raiders are a potential option depending on, I don't know, they don't take quarterback. I still think offensive line would make a lot of sense for them, but maybe they could take a corner. Who the hell knows what Denver, will do, etc. It just seems like there's a chance that the Jaguars might be picking corner 2 or corner 3, and that Terrion is, I don't know. I kind of expect Terrion to be the first corner off the board, honestly, over Kenyon.
Yeah, Quinion, it's pretty tough to beat the non-Power 5 conference.
Yeah.
Allegations. Yeah. He's got to be Khalil Mack in order to pay off.
Yeah. All right. Let's get to our next nugget. Okay. Another big news come out of Jacksonville lately has been the hiring of Tom Gamble. Trent Baalke said he was a senior personnel exec, something like that. Senior personnel guy. He's high up in the front office. This is his third different time working with Baalke. He worked with him with the 49ers. He worked with him in 2021 before leaving to become director of player personnel for Jim Harbaugh and the Michigan Wolverines for the 2022-2023 seasons. And now he's back, second time with Jax, third time. Yeah. So from the conversations I've had, and I've had a few different ones, it seems like maybe not the most permanent long-term guy to be in the front office for years and years, but I'll obviously be a big help this offseason. But I will say Tom Gamble had options, after Jim Harbaugh left, Michigan. Seems like a very real thing that he could have easily followed Harbaugh to Los Angeles, but it's a different dynamic there because they obviously have Ian Horwitz as GM, who he's never worked for. Maybe he just wants to answer to Harbaugh instead of him. There's a very real belief that he had an offer from the Chargers to follow Harbaugh, and he chose the Jaguars instead. And why that's interesting is he was actually, one of the final candidates to be general manager in 2013, when Dave Caldwell took the job. Mm-hmm. So the fact that he's known the cons for basically that long, it seems like he's an interesting guy to have, in the front office. And the fact that he chose the Jaguars, it seems like over the Chargers, seems like it's a place that he wants to be. So I've always heard positive things about him. So I think that's probably a positive addition to the front office. I mean, between him and Ethan Wall, it seems like Baalke has, guys in place that he can lean on, guys he's had history with who
the big
no Jags GM has really had in a minute, what Caldwell had, the Polian guy.
Yeah, sure. I don't know.
Bill Polian's kid. And I think that was his only real lieutenant, and John Idzik. So this seems like a better, setup. But
yeah,
moral of the story is it seems like he prefers this setup to Los Angeles's.
Yeah, I feel like the only thing I really remember about Tom Gamble is just when the report came out that he was leaving the Jaguars to go to Michigan, there was a couple people, maybe you included, that were like, oh man, that's actually kind of a loss for the Jaguars just because he's good at what he does. And so when I saw that he was coming back, I was like, okay, that's objectively a win. And it was funny hearing at the press conference, trying to figure out from the media like how long he's actually been around the building. It's been since February. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, Trent said, I believe February and like after the national championship.
True. All right.
Which,
well, I was going to say my take of the episode is that the Jags are going to draft a Michigan guy on day 2 because I already talked about like the whole championship pedigree thing. And so now that they've got someone who's working at Michigan just come back, I feel like you got to include at least one Michigan kid in your mock drafts.
Yeah. And it's been a good bit that they haven't drafted like one this entire like time. There's obviously a few different who make sense this year. I thought it was interesting. They noted how, he's obviously been a part of the college scene for the last 2 years. So have a lot of their coaches that they hired, on defense, the secondary, defensive line, linebacker. I think, not to say that's like a huge edge, but I think it's like at least something useful, entering the draft process, the knowledge that they have on some of the guys coming out, some of the connections that they have to the college game and the guys who coach these guys. I think it's not a huge thing, but I think it's not nothing.
Yeah, no, I was going to say it's worth mentioning. So it's not nothing. I agree with you.
Yeah. So I think the Tom Gamble union makes, all the sense in the world for the Jaguars, and definitely seems like they have the front office more solidified just in terms of like I said, stability and lieutenants. And it was Chris Polian I was thinking of. He was with Caldwell in Atlanta in 2012, and then was the Jaguars director of pro personnel through 2019, and he's been with the Commanders the last couple of years. So I told you it was a Polian. So etc. So moving on, the next I think thing that really take away, from this draft cycle and yesterday's press conference was Trevor Lawrence. Trevor talked on Tuesday, and it wasn't a groundbreaking revelation when he said that there's been conversations with the Jaguars about a contract extension. He downplayed it, I thought, saying how he's not really worried, or not worried. He's not really focused on it right now, which makes sense. I mean, players have their agents, handle that thing. They don't really need to focus on it until it's, really time to. And as he even said, his contract's technically not even up because it seems obvious a 5th year would be there in place. It was also funny that nobody asked Trent about 5th year for ETN yesterday. And I'm included in that nobody. I didn't realize it until I got home. But with that said, not a huge revelation from Lawrence. The Jaguars have basically been saying for 2 years they're going to extend Lawrence. Doug Pederson went on a tour about it last offseason where he basically said it over and over and over. They said something about it at the Combine. So it's been a very real thing for some time. Obviously, everybody's favorite insider, Pretty Ricky, had a tweet. I have a complete disdain for all. I don't want to say obviously all aggregation accounts, Dov, anybody Dov adjacent, I think is useless. But accounts who just claim to have sources when it's very clear that no, you do not. There's no need to say that you have them. And I think one of the worst things for sports social media the last couple of years is people running with sources and stuff. I mean, people had L'Jarius Sneed going it's a lock, the deal's done, going to the Colts. Goes to a team in the same division otherwise. But just looking at this guy's tweets from free agency, he was
he was on a heater. I feel like he's got to be connected to a player agency or because they were just all in a row.
It was impeccable. The only thing I saw him get wrong was he said Tyron Smith to the Chiefs. But he had Hollywood Brown to the Chiefs. He had the Ridley situation pretty perfectly.
He had Curtis Samuel to the Bills.
He had the Brian Burns trade.
Yeah, he did have that one.
It was pretty outrageous. So normally I'd say pay these things zero mind. I think it's absurd. I think you can probably pay this a few percentage points of mind. Maybe not 100,
it's
but
worth mentioning. It's not.
Yeah, exactly. So he obviously had a tweet that the Jags will make Trevor Lawrence the highest paid quarterback around the NFL draft. Yesterday, Trent Baalke, was asked about it. He said he's not going to force anything. He's going to let things play out like he did with Josh Allen, which was, I think, his victory lap for saying, like, yeah, the Josh Allen thing worked out.
Yeah.
And he said ownership and Doug Pederson were involved. Normally, I mean, I don't think you'd get ownership involved until things were getting pretty serious, like, because obviously it's going to be the biggest contract handed out in franchise history for the second time in one offseason, but it's probably going to be one of the biggest in NFL history. So obviously, if Shad Khan's going to be investing, hundreds of millions of dollars, in this guy's contract, he's going to be involved. I wouldn't imagine that happens until like the later stages, right? Like you don't get the owner involved like from day one when you're, in the bargaining process. I wouldn't think that makes sense, right?
Yeah, no, I think it's like here, like let's go over these finalized details because we already talked about like what the structure might kind of sort of look like, but now that we've actually gotten things pretty close to being in place, like we need to just like get your sign off really. And so I'm with you. I feel like that was like the biggest hint that Baalke gave yesterday at the presser.
Unsolicited.
Yeah, exactly. So like I don't know, maybe Shad is being it doesn't seem very Shad though to just like be involved with contract negotiations early. Like I feel like he would just show up and sign the dotted line more so.
I remember him saying a couple years ago when he like wanted to be more in the know of what's going on, like basically like who's getting paid, etc. Because I think previously he was like finding out with the rest of us, like when some guys like were getting extended, etc. But I'm not sure that means that like he's like right in there in the thick of every contract signing and stuff like that. So I'm definitely with you that I think it was a notable comment. I mean, it makes no sense that people would project him to not be among the highest paid quarterbacks, right? Like 55 to 60 million probably has to be the baseline, right? Like, okay, it's going to be a terrible day online. I'm telling you right now, Gus, if I break this pledge, I want you to publicly dismantle me, okay? I will not be involved with the discourse. I will only tweet and retweet the facts. Yeah, no, I won't do it. I won't do it. It's going to be terrible.
Oh, I'm stunned. Where did you go and who is this talking to me?
I can't do it, man. It's going to be bad. It's going to be real bad because
I know it is, but I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to defend 16 as he should be.
Yeah. You're going to go to the front lines. You're going to be in the trenches.
Yeah, I honestly should start doing some like film work now just to get ready.
Fair enough.
As soon as I saw the Pretty Ricky tweet, I started like working on the draft for contract.
Yeah, it's going to be bad because here's the thing. Yeah, I probably agree that his production doesn't warrant highest paid quarterback in the NFL. Sure. I will not disagree with that. I don't think they would disagree. I don't think anybody would disagree with that.
Trevor wouldn't disagree.
Yeah. However, Stephen A. Yeah. It's literally how contracts work in the NFL, man. He'll be the highest paid quarterback for a cup of coffee. And the reason you make him the highest paid quarterback now is because at the end of the day, they're extending him. This is not a make or break season for him getting a contract extension. Trevor Lawrence has the Jaguars by, like this. Like he is getting extended. Trent Baalke is not going to be the general manager that let Trevor Lawrence lead the Jaguars. If you even wanted to start the discussion, you have to ask, okay, who's going to be the quarterback then? So Trevor Lawrence isn't going anywhere. So you either make him one of the highest paid quarterbacks now, or you do it a year from now when guys like Dak Prescott, Tua, and Brock Purdy, are paid. Yeah, I said it.
That one got me a good one.
Brock's eligible after the season. If you don't pay Trevor, before then, maybe Brock gets paid before then. Brock probably going to be 60-something million guy. Yeah, it's just how it works.
Yeah.
It's just how it works.
Now, we've gone over this before, and we're going to have to go over it again, like, once the deal does happen. Even if you're not participating in the online discourse, we're going to have to get on a pod, obviously, to talk about it. But, yeah, it's just like you get what the last guy got plus $1.
Cap's going up.
That's just how it works. It doesn't really matter, as you were saying, like what you think about his pass production, even if you don't think like production aside, just like that he's on a similar playing level to like guys like Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert and Jalen Hurts. But first of all, you'd be wrong. And second of all, even if you do think that, like it's just the way it works is with these contract extensions, is that if he's even close to being in that tier, which he's like, everyone should say that he's closer to being in that tier than to like Daniel Jones or to Baker Mayfield. Yeah. And so like it's like those are the two tiers. You're either getting a Baker Mayfield contract or you're getting the Joe Burrow contract, and he's going to get the Joe Burrow contract.
Yeah, 100%. And it's like people understand this with every other position but quarterback. Like people can grasp this with everybody else but the quarterback position. It's good stuff, really. So the Jaguars definitely didn't make it seem like yesterday, like it's far away, right? Like I would say probably before training camp at the latest at this point, right?
Yeah, I think that's definitely fair. I think that's usually just like the general
Yeah.
soft deadline for quarterback extensions, just because they want to wrap it up before the player hits the practice fields. And so I would say I'm like 90% sure it's going to happen before training camp.
$500 million or no?
No, but I think he's going to get like just like the biggest. I think what's going to happen is that when the reported numbers come out, it's going to look like $1 more than Burrow's, and it'll be like, okay, he barely tops Burrow. But then when the reported numbers come out, I think it'll be like Josh Allen, because like Josh Allen had pretty much the same contract as Brian Burns on paper, but then when you actually look at like the guarantees and the prorated bonuses and all this stuff, then it's a much healthier contract, and he's expected to actually take home more money than Brian Burns. So I think Trevor Lawrence is going to be the same way, where like it looks on paper like just barely above Burrow, but I think it could be like in reality way more than Burrow got. So last week we set the over/under at 265.5 million. You were taking the under, and you just asked me 500 million.
I took the under.
Yeah.
Reverse.
I know. I made sure to go back and find the number, because I was going to ask if you wanted to change your mind.
Yeah. I've been Baalke ball. Yeah. You kicked my ass. Yeah. Protect. That shows you how married I am to most of these things. If I'm not going on a tangent about it, I probably don't care enough. Because I don't even remember having the conversation.
Oh no, we were going back and forth about 255, 265, 265.
Yeah. I'm an idiot. He's going to get more Burrow. I don't know what kind of chance I was under, but yeah, I played the Uno reverse card. You got me. You got me cornered, Gus.
Whether it happens before or after the draft doesn't matter too much, but I mean, obviously having it happen this offseason is huge. And then like the biggest reason is, like you said, where like he's not going anywhere, and so like if you're going to sign him to a massive contract,
you're going to pay him
next year. But then also just on top of it, like I feel like you get so much more roster flexibility if you do sign him onto the books now versus next year. Because then like if he's not signed going into the 2025 offseason, and then neither is Cam Robinson or Walker Little or Tyson Campbell, like holy cow, you got a lot of work to do. And then we saw
it's like what happened this year with Josh Allen and Calvin Ridley.
Yeah, and then like they weren't able to get Josh Allen and Calvin Ridley done in time. And so like I think that it will happen this offseason, but it's for a lot of different reasons. It's important that it does.
Yeah, I'm with you. Can I say, though, that for as much respect I have for his predictions, Mr. Ricky, he did piss me off royally yesterday.
What did he do to you, John?
He stoked the Brandon Aiyuk flames again. I can't make it go away, Gus. I've tried peeing on the fire. I've tried throwing water on the fire, and nothing. It just keeps on burning.
You're talking about Jacksonville specifically? Because I feel like at this point, like Aiyuk is going to get traded.
Yeah, no. Didn't he have a tweet where he said like they had interest in trading for Brandon Aiyuk? I'm pretty positive he did.
Yeah, he said like
Jaguars specifically.
And then he said like, oh, by the way, the Jaguars also have a little bit of interest in Aiyuk. They're just trying to get the Lawrence deal done first.
Yeah,
and so I think. So maybe if Lawrence deal gets done before the draft, the odds of an Aiyuk trade happening go up a little bit, but I think it's pretty marginal. I think it's like it goes from like a 2% chance to a 3% chance, right?
Here's my thing. How many teams have an interest in trading for Brandon Aiyuk? Probably more than a couple, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All the teams outside their division because of divisional trades.
That's what I'm saying. Like, obviously teams are – yeah, obviously the Jaguars would be interested in adding Brandon Aiyuk to their roster. I'd be interested in getting a new truck tomorrow. You know, like it would be a very ideal scenario.
Yeah,
I'm planting my flag, Gus. I won't remember that. I won't forget this. Brandon Aiyuk will not be a Jacksonville Jaguar.
Okay.
Yeah, taking that stance. If he is, we can clip this. We can run it for the eternity. But I wanted to go away, Gus. I do not think there's a chance that Brandon. I think even the same account said the teams who are in the primary running, and Jacksonville wasn't included.
Yeah, no, it was. I think the Giants, the Patriots,
and
Washington. Yeah, and then like later on, I feel like it was just like after Jags fans were bickering at him, like, "What about the Jags? What about the Jags?" He was like, "Oh, yeah, I guess they have technically made one call to offer their third rounder." I don't know, John. I'm pretty excited for when Aiyuk trade goes down, and then they draft a Michigan guy on day 2.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting watching Malik Neighbors and Brandon Aiyuk and T. Higgins in the fall.
Looking forward to it.
That's where I'm at with Jackson Powers Johnson snapping that thing back.
Which one would you be more mad at? An Aiyuk trade happening or Powers Johnson being the pick at 17th overall?
Still the second one.
That's what I thought.
It pissed me off so much.
No, I've tried to stay away from the JPJ Jags discourse, but it would make me mad too.
God, we really haven't seen it. It's been about a month now. God, that's great.
Yeah,
that's great. That's good stuff. Okay, so for reference, I don't respect the anonymous scouts in the Bob McGinn articles. I think most of the time you can read what they're saying, and if you watch the player, you can be like, okay, what the hell are these guys watching?
Yeah, it's objectively wrong.
Yeah, I don't think anybody should ever hold scouts up on a mantle. I think for the most part, they're very self-important pearl clutchers who like the smell of their own farts. However, the JPJ stuff in the McGinn article made me laugh.
I saved the article, but then I just haven't gotten around to it. So lay it on me. What do you say?
They basically called him like a head case and said he wasn't like a typical offensive line mentality. And some ridiculous comment about it. He said he's the boy who cries wolf because he'll get injured, get carted off, and then come back 10 plays later. And I'm like, this is completely ridiculous. Okay, one, it's self-serving because I hated that pick. 2, it's some of the most ridiculous content I've ever seen posted. Like, come on, dude.
It is funny that they say he
in the same breath.
Because I feel
in the same breath they said he was a Pro Bowl ready-made center. Go ahead.
Why are we doing this? It's literally for clicks. It's so annoying.
My bad for cutting you off.
No, you're good. I don't know what I was gonna say, but can we just get to Thursday?
Yeah. It's just the anonymous scout stuff. The draft every point is terrible, and the AD Mitchell stuff. Did you see that one?
No, from the same go long thing.
Yeah, from Bob McGinn. No, it's basically somebody saying he was hard to basically coach because he's diabetic and sometimes he had mood swings because of it. I'm like, I don't think that's how it works.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Print out that article and then light it on fire.
So yeah, it's that point in the season because you can go back. I think Brandon Thorne posted in that same series. A guy a few years ago said Penei Sewell wasn't aggressive or physical in the run game or something like that. I'm like,
come on, watch the games. Come on.
Yeah, so just important to remember this time of year. Whenever you see anonymous quotes from scouts and stuff, you don't have to take these scouts' words.
It must be weird for casual draft fans to start paying attention a week before the draft because that's just when all of the BS comes out. If you're paying attention to everything that comes out in the week before the draft, I feel 80% of it is smokescreens compared to 30 or 40% of it before the week before.
The goat said that it's all agent BS until the night before. That's what Belichick said on, I think it was McAfee. I did not watch, but saw the clip on Twitter. So
I love Bill. I'll find that.
But he was loose, man. He was loose. He was ready to go. He saw the crap
with all of the Lombardi trophies. That's incredible. And it was the day that ESPN article came out about it.
I was gonna say maybe he saw the craft
distant, basically. So yeah, that was king behavior.
Yeah. So I mean, Bill says it. I mean, he's been around in more drafts than I've been alive for. It's probably right. So I'd probably advise that most stuff you hear between now and probably Wednesday night it's probably like BS.
Unless it's from us.
Exactly. We serve no BS here. As long as I remember the conversation.
Hey, that's what the notes app is for, to get the timestamp down.
Exactly. Well, Gus, is there anything we missed from the presser? Any other important things to hit? I thought it was a ho hum day. Nothing groundbreaking, but at least a little informative.
Got the juices flowing a little bit.
It's one of my favorite press conferences every year. I'll say that. I love the pre-draft press conferences. I love them.
Yeah, I would say so too. Even though I didn't go to this one or the one last year, it's been now like whole calendar year that I've been working full time on the beat or whatever. And so like I'd agree with you where the press conferences, the pre-draft press conference is the best one.
To show you the importance of them, we had, I think, 6 to 7 people at Trevor Lawrence and Foray Oluokun. And we had probably 25 to 30 plus yesterday. Obviously when the general manager speaks, people want to be there and listen. So, Gus, we're going to be back next week. We'll figure out the day. It'll be before the draft. We'll do a little dueling mock draft and also give our final takes on number 17 and beyond. But you got anything else for us, my friend?
Michigan kid is the day 2 lock. The day 3 lock is a linebacker. Because I would have already told you that, but Baalke was talking about how more size is going to be more size is going to be more better for the kickoff, for the new kickoff rules, because since players are lining up so close to each other and don't have as far to run, it's going to be more big bodies, even offensive and defensive linemen along with linebackers, as opposed to I don't know, linebackers and safeties or something. Bless you, Lordy. So. Yeah, day 3 linebacker. Put that one in your mocks alongside a Michigan jabroni.
I get allergies. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah. Holland wasn't too bad until a day or 2 ago, and then it's shot back up again.
Can you give me a name for the Michigan day 2 guy? If it's Blake Corum, I wouldn't be able to.
That'd be funny. If they draft a running back, I'm praying it would be Audric Estime from Notre Dame. But it would be pretty funny if they got the Irving kid from Oregon, because he just looks like a better Tank Bigsby to me.
Dane Brugler mocked them the Louisville running back, which I thought was perfect. His little spark plug.
Yeah. I could see them getting a little scat back. I feel like Doug likes his little scat backs back in Philadelphia between Boston Scott and.
Do you need more than one power guy?
Do you what now?
Do you need more than one power guy, really?
No. Especially for it's a running back room. There's gonna be 2 or 3 guys and special teams or so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would say for the Michigan kid, Chris Jenkins would probably be the guy that put it at the top. I don't know. I feel like his best landing spot would be in between picks 48 and 96. Why are you shaking your head? Not a big Chris Jenkins guy?
That was mid.
I don't know. I think he would be. I was gearing up to say he'd be a better 3rd round pick than a 2nd round pick. I think it would be a little bit mid if he was a 2nd rounder. But in a 3rd rounder, I think he's
in the 3rd round, I think it'd be a fine pick. I'd give it a C-.
You know what I would give a C- is the slot cornerback from Michigan, Mike S., whatever his last name is. I'm not even going to try to say it. But
why?
I like him, but as a 4th rounder, a good Josiah Scott, or maybe in the 3rd, but I haven't seen that he's going to be an early 2nd round pick. I'm
I saw some report saying 1st round. I'm that makes no sense.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
We're not there yet.
Yeah, I'm talking about value here, John. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair.
Board breathe. That's what we're going off of.
I don't know. Chris Jenkins would be C-, D+ in my opinion. I feel like it's hitting a single at 48. Maybe you can steal 2nd.
Wilson would. Now that we're saying all these Michigan guys, they aren't really great fits, because Roman Wilson is
Christian Kirk.
Pure slot only, even more of a slot only than Christian Kirk is. So that makes sense.
Chris Jenkins is the best fit, and he might honestly be the favorite to be the pick at 48, because I'm pretty sure defensive line falls off pretty hard after round 2 this year. You have some guys like Dorless and LSU guys, but that's about it.
I don't know if I'm gonna end up doing a final mock. We'll definitely have one on Big Cat, but I might have someone else do it. But if I were doing one, I would definitely.
Come on.
I'll do one.
Thank you.
Now, if I were doing it in 5 minutes, it would definitely be corner round 1, defensive line round 2 would be what I'm looking.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Okay.
Last thing. I know I've tried to exit us a few times. Last thing. You've done a great job tracking the top 30 visits.
I'm just reading tweets, man.
Yeah. Somebody asked you and I both, like, it was interesting that they have Kool-Aid and Arnold and Nate Wiggins in, but not, Mitchell or Cooper the Gene. Does that mean anything? From looking, so there were no top 30 visits in 2021. Everything was still virtual. Obviously not 2020. So Trent Baalke's only been able to have them the last 2 drafts. It's been 19 picks. He's drafted 4 guys off the top 30 list. It's been Trayvon Walker, Chad Muma, Tyler Lacey, and Cooper Hodges. That's 1 of their 3 first-round picks, 2 of their 7 top 100 picks, and 4 out of 19 overall. It means something different for every GM, but it truly looks like there's no trend with them. They'll probably draft at least 1 guy off their top 30 list, but otherwise, it seems like there's no trend or rhyme or reason, because there's a million reasons you could want to bring a guy in. You're trying, the draft is completing a puzzle. You're trying to get as much information as possible. Sometimes you need more information from some guys than others, So
yeah, it could be medical. It's going to be effort level on a certain play. It could be
exactly
what the coaches were asking you to do. It could be just so many different things.
Exactly. So I truly believe that when it comes to the Jaguars and this front office, there is no trend for top 30 visits, and I would just probably ignore them in terms of importance.
So what I do is that I have the top 30 visits all listed, but I've been tracking every single visit.
For sure.
Combine visits, even informal combine visits, local days, the Orange Juice Bowl, all this stuff. That's definitely not.
The bowl the Gators ran?
The bowl and all the other ones. And so I think you definitely shouldn't look at it and be like, ooh, they brought in Kool-Aid McKinstry on a top 30 visit. That means they're interested in him. You definitely can't do it on a name by name basis, because they're just trying to collect more information. We don't know what kind of information they're trying to collect.
Yeah.
But what I try to do is just look at it positionally. So I'm like, okay, they've visited a lot of cornerbacks, which obviously cornerback is one of their biggest needs, but almost all of them are round 1 and then round 4 type guys. And then they visited a handful of defensive linemen, and all of them feel like day 2 guys. And then they visited a lot of receivers, but all of them feel like 3rd round guys. And so I think you can, I would have to go back and look at last year's tracker to see whether that actually ended up making sense. Cause I know I was definitely tracking just the total amount of positions and stuff that they're looking at.
Yeah.
Too. I think it's more than anything, a helpful tool for mock drafts to be that's weird that they have interviewed so many 5th roundish linebackers. I'll make sure to include one in my mock. Does that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense. And I think you're right, because I think there are definitely trends like that in the guys that they've looked at in terms of this year's, visits. I will say, maybe I'm just hurt. I mocked Nolan Smith them a lot last year because they had 9 or 10 edges in for a visit. So I thought it was a lock that they were going to take one fairly early, and then obviously they didn't. But I feel I don't know, it maybe has been a indicator for some day 3 guys they have interest in, the Tyler Lacey's and the Cooper Hodges of the world.
Right.
That makes sense. And maybe guys who they visit with on multiple occasions, which is my whole point with calling it top 30 visits, because you only get 30 in-person ones, but you have pro day visits, you have Zoom visits, you have combine visits. There are all these different times they can meet with these players. Like Anton, they talked about meeting with him at the combine last year. So it's just a lot of different moving pieces. So that's just my thoughts on it. For fans asking, why haven't they brought in player X, Y, or Z? Why are they bringing in player whoever? I just think there's no way for anybody other than them to know the specific reasons why guys are brought in.
I got a question for you before. So I want to ask it now in case I forget to ask you next week. But what do you make of Tez Walker? Because he's had 3 different visits in this pre-draft process, and I don't know specifically off the top of my head, but I would assume it's combine, pro day, top 30. And I went back and for between this year and last year, there hasn't been a prospect that's visited the Jaguars 3 times. There's been a handful of guys that visited 2 times, but he's the first guy that's visited him 3 times. So it's I'm confused kind of, because I'm what information do they still not have? Still trying to figure out.
Did they draft any of the 2 guys?
I would have to go back and look. Off the top of my head, I don't think so because I think they met with Anton at the combine and then they met with Tank at some point. They didn't meet with Bretton Strange, but they met with
Had to throw people off that scent.
I would say they met with 6 to 7 people, like Antonio Johnson. I'm pretty sure they met with 6 to 7 people, not just top 30, but throughout all of the pre-draft visits.
Yeah,
at least half of the class met with them at some point.
Yeah, I don't know what to do with the Tez Walker thingy. It has to be an indication of interest, right? I don't know why else you're doing that because he seems
it's not like you're asking him about Drake May.
Yeah, and he seemed you have to seems like a guy maybe to do homework on just because of the transfer and everything that went on with that, his Senior Bowl experience, some of that kind of stuff. If you look at it, Baalke hasn't drafted many transfer players in Jacksonville. I think that some of the only ones are I know Christian Braswell last year. There's not many more. I'm not going to count Jordan Smith. He left campus due to a credit card scam. Mm-hmm. So I see it. I have it. I had it down somewhere because it was a theory I was running that I was like, okay, they've taken 2, Jordan Smith and Christian Braswell, and I'm not going to count Jordan Smith.
Yeah,
that was kind of a forced transfer.
Braswell, I feel was
a throwaway pick.
Yeah, and it was. I think he fell a little bit, so that was we cannot take this guy. It was almost like Antonio Johnson, but just more low key.
And for a record, I have nothing to compare that against any other GM, so I don't know if it's what it means. I was just interested in seeing in the days of transfer portal how many guys they've taken to transfer. It's not many, but Tez Walker is one of those guys. So I don't know. They have every visit possible with it.
Yeah, exactly. I just don't speak of it.
If they now I have no real opinion. I think he's maybe a 4th round guy. I see people have him in the 3rd. I'm not a huge fan of him, but I'm now rooting against the selection because it will be hilarious if they don't draft him after having multiple chances at him that they spent all this time with him. It's what was the point?
Yeah. I can't even think of a single other North Carolina prospect. Are they going to ask him about Cedric Gray, the linebacker? I don't know. I'm really interested to see if he ends up a Jaguar or not. I think I'm trying to figure out a take that involves Brandon Aiyuk. Who's more likely to be a Jaguar between Tez Walker and him? I suppose Tez Walker. You're on mute.
Tweet out that poll. I would love to see.
Who's more likely to be a Jaguar?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, we'll open with the results next week.
Yeah, I know which vote I'm giving. All right. On that note, anything else, my friend?
No, I think that was a good little review. I'll make sure to be prepared with plenty of hot takes next week.
All right, we'll be back next week for our final thoughts on pick 17 and beyond, plus a little mock draft of the first round. We did that last year. I might go back and see how right we were, how off we were.
Did we do a full NFL mock?
Yeah, a first round.
That sounds right. Sure. I was going to say we should do that again, even just because we're having fun and it doesn't pertain to the Jags. But we should
have fun here. Yeah, we have fun here. With that said, thank you guys for listening to the 95th episode of the Jaguar Report. Who would have thought? Not me. Be back next week.
You just got Baalke balled.